What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Ratch Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors. The season is a handful of days away, and I'm going to be talking about three bold predictions, my three bold predictions for the Toronto Raptors this season. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that would be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, my first bold prediction will be one that not a lot of people will agree with, but here it goes anyways. Davion Mitchell is not going to be on the Raptors roster past this season. I think the Raptors could potentially move off him. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I saying this? Well, it's quite simple. When you look at Davion Mitchell, what are the qualities that the Raptors saw in him? Exactly what you're seeing in Jamal Shead during the preseason. No, I'm not saying Jamal Shead is going to be the Raptors' backup point guard this season, but take into consideration for a player like Davion Mitchell, he is an expiring contract. Would the Toronto Raptors be comfortable offering him a 2 or 3 year contract in the range of $9+ million? Very unlikely. So why would the Raptors trade him for that simple reason and that simple reason alone? If you're not going to re-sign a player, might as well trade him and try to get some sort of assets back. Now, what those assets may look like, it's hard to kind of say with Davion Mitchell. I mean, second round picks possibly is a realistic target for what the Raptors may want in return. But also just taking into consideration Davion Mitchell, when you talk about him in general, why would a Kings team move him in the first place? I mean, you have several reasons that many people may list, like they drafted a backup point guard. They want more minutes and touches going to that point guard. Unfortunately, he is injured. Also, other reasons maybe that they don't want him to, they don't want to sign him to a new contract. But I think as an NBA fan, as you get older, you become a little bit wiser. For myself personally, I was very excited last offseason when the Toronto Raptors signed Jalen McDaniels. I even made a video. A lot of Raptors fans are excited. We got a good 6'8", 6'9" player. And now we know where his career is kind of going with respect to Jalen McDaniels. So you got to start questioning these things as fans. Why would a team like the Kings not only move off of Davion Mitchell, but attach a second round pick to him? If the Kings really viewed Davion so highly, and if they actually wanted, maybe they could have gotten second round picks and got an asset in return of giving up an asset and trading Davion Mitchell as well. One thing I will constantly see as a YouTuber is understand that teams see a lot of the stuff about a player, not only how he's performing, but practices, how his attitude is, how he is in person. Is he coming late to practices? I'm not saying that's the case with Davion Mitchell, but you have to question why teams like the Kings would be ready to move off of Davion Mitchell, not only in the manner that they did, but why would they move off him, right? So again, those are some of the questions you have to ask yourself. Now, the reason I believe the Raptors will move on from Davion Mitchell is simple, because a lot of the qualities, like I said, they were looking for in Davion, Jamal Shead has, and even you could argue in some games, Jamal Shead looked better than Davion Mitchell. Now, I say this with respect to Davion, but when you take into consider Jamal Shead, you look at some of the things that he's doing on the court. So sure, you could say it's just preseason, it's only a couple of games, but one thing you cannot fluke your way into the NBA is defense. If a player, a young player, or whether someone that's a G League player comes in during the regular season, preseason, has a couple good games where he scores 15, 20 points, you could say maybe that's a fluke. But one thing you cannot fluke is defense, and Jamal Shead really demonstrated that during the preseason. He looked quite impressive, and many fans, including myself, will tell you there are various times where Jamal Shead looked better than Davion Mitchell on the defensive side. And also take into consideration, guys, if they do sign Davion Mitchell to a long-term contract, that means Jamal Shead won't be necessarily getting minutes. So I personally think Jamal Shead could be the Raptors' backup point guard as soon as even next season. So that's why I think the Raptors eventually may look to move off of Davion Mitchell. Again, I'm not saying they won't re-sign him or they can't re-sign him, but if they can get a second round pick, he's not making a ton of money now. Maybe they look to move off him at the closer to the NBA trade deadline, and then you can give some minutes to Jamal Shead on a team that, like the Raptors, that very likely could be tanking. So that is my first bold prediction of this video. Let's move on to bold prediction number 2. Now, my second bold prediction may not be as bold as some of the other predictions, but I think RJ Barrett will be the leading scorer for the Toronto Raptors this season. Now, why do I say that? Do I think Scotty Barnes isn't capable of being the leading scorer? Absolutely not. But when you take into consideration the Raptors' very likely starting lineup would be Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Grady Dick, you have to take into consideration your two best shooters are going to be Grady Dick and Emmanuel Quickley. Now, if Emmanuel Quickley is handling the ball, then all of a sudden that just leaves Grady Dick as a really good three-point shooter and some okay shooters in Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett, right? So again, that's why you have to take into considerations the roles that both RJ and Scotty will be playing this season. With respect to RJ's game, I think Scotty Barnes, most fans and I mean, it's the truth that he is a better playmaker and a better passer than RJ Barrett. So now when you put the ball in Scotty Barnes' hand, he'll have Emmanuel quickly. He'll also have Grady Dick to pass the ball to. And not only that, but take into consideration how much attention he'll be getting from opposing defenses because of how good he is offensively. You can make that decision quite easily. I think Darko will, as a head coach, where Scotty Barnes will have a lot of opportunities to handle the ball and even run the offenses for that reason. In terms of RJ Barrett, I think he will solely focus on scoring, which is why I think he'll probably focus his skill set is just more so focused for scoring, whereas Scotty will be more focused on distributing the ball and getting his teammates the ball rather than scoring all the time, which is why I truly believe RJ will be the leading scorer in points per game for the Raptors this season. Now let's move on to bold prediction number 3 here. Now, out of all my bold predictions, I will say this is probably the least likely to happen. I'll explain my reasoning in just a minute here, but my bold prediction number 3 will be Kelly Olynyk will be moved by the NBA trade deadline. Now, why do I say that? The Raptors obviously acquired him because he could be a stretch backup big for them. Although a lot of fans will tell you that he's not really a center; he's more suited for the power forward position. But when you take into consideration how he's not making a ton of money, it's pretty reasonable for his contribution and his production, and he can still stretch the floor, which you see a lot of teams are absolutely craving for any sort of big man that can do that can stretch the floor for you. Kelly can pass as well. So when you think about the options the Raptors will have when it comes to how many teams will be coming for Kelly Olynyk, I think it could happen. It's one of the least likely to happen, and I'll explain my reasoning in just a moment. But when you look at a lot of teams, you look at the Boston Celtics, for example, you could possibly get a couple second round picks. Maybe you could get a heavily protected first round pick. And of course, we know the next 2 years in the NBA draft are going to be absolutely stacked. And not only does it give you an option to draft a decent player at the late first round, what it also gives you the option for a team like the Toronto Raptors to do is package that pick and your first round pick and potentially move up in the draft as well. Even if it's one or two spots, I think that would be a luxury for the Toronto Raptors to have. And just take into consideration how many teams are going to also want to get off bad contracts as well. Kelly Olynyk's only got 2 years on his contract, so it isn't a bad contract by any means. Again, now, why do I say the Raptors are unlikely to do this compared to some of the other things I have mentioned? Simple reason, you take into consideration Masai Ujiri ever since, he went through that little whole situation with DeMar DeRozan. One thing he has never done is really traded away players that have re-signed with that team. Of course, it does happen once in a while, but he hasn't done that because obviously not a lot of players want to come to Toronto, but obviously the players that do, you don't want to lose their trust by trading them in the same season or a season or so after signing that contract, right? So, and also taking into consideration for Kelly Olynyk, he not only re-signed with the Raptors, but he didn't attend free agency. He signed that contract before hitting free agency. So personally, I feel like Masai will have that obligation as an executive to not trade in Bobby Webster, of course, as well, where they feel like, this player's shown loyalty to us. He's re-signed, and obviously he signed before free agency. It may not be a wise move, of course, player personnel wise. When you talk about how management and players' relationships, matters so much, I don't necessarily think Masai, out of all these things I've mentioned, is likely to happen. But again, it would be it'd be very interesting actually strategy for the Toronto Raptors, young team, to not only shed a little bit of money, but also acquire some second round picks or maybe possibly a heavily protected first round pick as well. That'd be a nice get if you personally ask me. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. What do you think of these 3 bold predictions? And what are your 3 bold predictions for the Raptors this season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And that will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.